Hi, so thank you very much for joining me. Today I am doing a page with a drawing that if you would like to have the drawing, you just have to email me, and you can contact me through my website, juliebrashart.com. So I'm using a nice thick modeling paste and just a Flourish stencil, and I am being careful to try and just get the flourish that I want onto the page. I'm going to be doing the corners, and it's just a case of this is an old stencil that I've had for a very long time. You can see it's quite well worn. I do also have the Holtz Flourish stencil, and that's also a really wonderful one to use. Just that this is a bit of a bigger book. It's 11 inches tall, so it's pretty big. So I'm just making sure that all my corners are covered, and I'm coming a little bit into the edge. I just want to have most of the outside having some detail on it. And again, I'm just being really careful to try and get just the parts of the flourish that I want. I already have an idea of how this page is going to be laid out, so I am being aware of where I need open space. I'm just going to cut this little edging part, and I'm just going to use a little bit of this in between, just to make sure that most of the outside edge has some detail and some texture to it. Here I'm attempting to show you the texture. Of course, it's not very clear white on white, but later on you will see, when I put the gesso on, you will be able to see that. The number of the stencil is THMS 004. It's just like simple stripes, kind of distressy stripes. And I am going in between wherever there is the flourishes. I'm not going over any of the flourishes. And try and keep, if you're going to use a stripy stencil, try and keep those stripes as straight as you can, simply because I do put stripes onto this page later on again. So I'm just filling up any empty space, and now everything has dried. I've just left it a few minutes. Everything has dried, and I'm adding white gesso on top of absolutely everything. I'm doing this because I don't want my colors to sink into the background. Now that the gesso's on, you can a little bit more see some of the texture. I'm trying, but yeah, you can see it a little bit. It is beautiful, but as soon as I start adding colors, you'll start to see all of those textures. So for today's page, I'm actually going to be using the Tim Holtz Rangers Distress Re-Inkers. So it's just regular Distress Re-Inkers. And that's the Candied Apple. And I just changed my mind on that pink. And this is I think it's a mustard seed. And I decided to go with a lovely hot pink, the picked raspberry. So these are like glass droppers, and you can just put little drops wherever you want. So you'll see that I start by dropping some of the pink, and then I'm just going to spray it with some water. And as soon as you add the water, and these are very intense colors because they're re-inkers. I love them. I just recently purchased them after watching a Tim Holtz demonstration with them, and decided I just had to have them. So now I'm just spreading the color out, and I'm thinning it out with the water, of course, and of course it's going on to the white gesso background, which is dry, by the way, when I'm doing this. And so I just will add water, and then I'll just be adding more drops of color until my entire background is covered. And I'm quite a fan of red and pink being together. I mean, I've worn it in clothing forever, but here on the page it really came out gorgeous. So this is I'll have to find out what color that was. I'll be back in 1 second. Scattered straw is that color. Phew. Yes, anyway, it's hard to tell when I'm watching the video back. Obviously I didn't hold it up long enough to read it myself, so my apologies for that. So scattered straw is the second color. So picked raspberry, then the scattered straw, And you can see I'm not being particularly fussy about where it's going. And anybody who knows my work, you know that for me, my backgrounds are layers upon layers upon layers. So this is literally just like layer 3. First one was the texture, second one was the gesso. Now I'm just adding the third layer, and it's just mixing with water these beautiful intense colors. And I think this is now adding the candied apple. The candied apple is really beautiful in the distress ink versus the distress oxide. I mean, everything oxide has that chalky effect, so your red is not as intense in a distress oxide. So if you are using distress oxides for your background, as opposed to if you don't have the regular distress inks, and of course you can definitely do that, I would say to you, you probably wouldn't need to do a lot of the last layer that I do here, which is I spray with distress oxide to oxidize all my colors in the background and bring them down a little bit. But it's just a very different effect doing this versus just going straight in with oxides. Can you do oxides? Absolutely. You can do anything you want. I mean, you can use your distress ink pads if you have them, and just smush some color onto the side of your work area, onto your craft mat or onto your glass mat, whatever you're using. And then you can just pick it up with the brush, add water to it, pick it up with the brush, and still create this effect. I know that a lot of you guys do have the regular distress ink pads, so go ahead and use those if you want to. But you could definitely also use the oxide sprays to spray them beside and put them onto the background in these kind of stripy motions. You'll get a similar effect to what I ended up with, but yeah, it definitely won't be exactly the same. You can see I decided that I needed way more pink, so I added pink. I love the pink when it blends with the yellow. It's just so pretty. That the straw color is not a pure bright sunshine yellow the way that the mustard seed is definitely more like that. The straw is definitely softer and a little bit more muted of a yellow, and when the pink hits it, it just is absolutely gorgeous. You can see that I've also put in craft mat in between my pages to protect the layers and the pages underneath, and I always do that. And I am using quite a lot of water because I want this to run and mix. So you'll see I'm actually letting it run, and you can see it running down those stripes, and it runs into the texture of the flourishes. Really, really pretty. And then it's just a case of drying all of this. I do use a heat gun. If you're doing this very patiently, if you have a lot of time and you're doing this, you can let it just dry naturally. You can just spray it with water and let it dry naturally. The only thing you have to watch for is the center line. You do not want all your color running into the center line. You can see I'm actually picking it out of the center line right now because I don't want it to bleed into previous pages and pages I will be doing at a later stage. It's almost impossible to stop that from happening unless you tape up your center, and I don't like that look of having a masking tape. No matter how thin your masking tape is, it pretty much is always visible. So I just try to be a little bit careful with not flooding the center, and then I just do a dry. And now you'll see as it's drying, because it's on this white gessoed background, you'll see that it really dries up a lot lighter than it looks when it's wet, and you can definitely see the texture now that it has the color on it. Really pretty. But of course, me being me, this is not the final result for my background. No. I had an idea in my head, so I wanted to add stripes. So this is just masking tape. This yellow masking tape is just from, I think I bought this at the Home Depot. It's kind of big rolls, but it's fantastic because its tack is brilliant. It stays on beautifully. It doesn't allow for bleeding, but it removes without damaging anything underneath. So I do use this a lot. It's kind of like a washi tape, I guess you could say. So I'm just creating stripes, and I'm leaving like a little, it's narrower in the center than what the actual tape is, and that's deliberate because I'm going to be doing second layers as well, and I want the background color to show between. So I'm just taping all of this up. Yeah, you can see sometimes that tape just will not behave itself. And again, what I'm trying to do here, I'm showing this in kind of a little slower time because I want you to see that I'm not really going to be painting into the flourishes. I will be painting obviously over the stripes, but I'm not painting into the flourishes. So I'm going to be taking VersaFine Clair Black, I think it's called Nocturne, and just a little sponge. I think this is like one of the mini sponges, and I'm just going to do a little faded look. I'm not going for like really black. So I'm just putting a little bit of color in. I just fast forward all that for you, and then I remove the tape. So now you can see I have black stripes in the background, and it's kind of a big space in between, and that has been done deliberate, that where the tape was. So now I'm going to take a very thin, oh, I forgot, while I had the black VersaFine Clair out, I did the black edge. So all the way around the edge, and again, this is something I do a lot of, with a color or with black or with a vintage photo. I do like to have my pages framed somewhat. So just speeding everything up there, so you can see the effect. And now I'm just going to take a very narrow washi tape, and I'm placing this in the inside of the wider background stripe. So I'm preserving the black stripe obviously, and that is so that I will have the background color going all the way through the sides of the stripes. So I'll just speed this up a little bit so you don't have to watch me putting on tape forever. This is a very narrow, very narrow little tape. It's super for doing stripes. So I'm just taking white gesso, and I'm going to paint in between. And the first layer of gesso is quite light, and I'm not worrying about that because I'm going to dry it, and I'm going to do a second coat. So I just dry the whole of the background. As you can see, even as it's drying, how it fades to even whiter. And I wanted it to be a little bit darker, so I will go back in with my brush and do a second coat. And this will take it to the level that I would like it to be at. And I'm just fading out the tops and bottoms. So I just started that slow so you can see how I'm doing that. I just fade out the top and the bottom again. I don't want it to have like a very stark ending, so I just did a little blending. And then when you remove the tape, you have black stripe, background color, white stripe, background color, black stripe, etc. And I just think this worked really well for me. It was exactly what I was wanting for the background. I wanted a really bright colored background, but I wanted some black and white in it because I am going to actually have, my flowers are going to be left mostly white, just a little bit of very pale color in the inside, so that it creates a nice stark background for what's coming next. I'm just taking, this is the Tim Holtz little sanding block, and I'm just sanding some of the color off of where I have texture, and it just kind of makes the flourishes pop. So this is Antique Linen, and this is the Distress Oxide Spray, and I'm going to be using this. You can see I popped my sheets back in underneath. I'm going to use this to just soften everything and almost tie the whole background together. So I've done a nice little layer of that, of the oxide spray, and what happens is the oxide activates the underneath color, except where there's black and white. And then that is pumice stone. Again, it's the Distress Oxide Spray. It's by Tim Holtz and made by Ranger. and just add a little bit of that onto my background. And now I'm just adding the pumice stone, and it's the same thing. I'm just, you know, using those two colors to pull the background together, but also to push some of the color back a little bit so it's not crazy. So it looks very white here and looks very light here, but when you see the photos at the end, or you'll just see in the video, it's not as light as what it looks here. So just making sure everything's got a little bit of a coating of the oxide spray, and then just, yeah, it looks really good. And then I've just dried the page, and you can even see as it's drying just how pretty it is. So now I'm going to be using a Tim Holtz CMS215 stamp set, and there's a big stamp set and then there's a smaller stamp set that's the exact same things. So I'm using like the cherry blossom from each of those stamp sets, so the larger one and the smaller one. And the paper that I have, it's just a piece of paper from a scrapbooking pad. Again, I've had this for a very long time. I really couldn't tell you what it is. I'm using VersaFine Clair, the Black Nocturne, and I'm stamping onto this paper because it has a very soft gray thread through it. It's just like really very faint. It doesn't even show in here. It's a very faint flourish that kind of matches the flourish here. And I'm stamping. What I did was, because it's thin paper, I've glued it onto a piece of white cardstock, and then I'm just stamping out a bunch of flowers. I think I ended up using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the large and 1, 2, 3, 4 of the smaller ones, but I do like to always do extra just in case. And then I wanted some buds, so I just hand drew some buds. They're very, very simple and easy to draw, and if you look at the pictures at the end, you'll see how simple that they are. You could even just do like a cotton bud looking type of cherry blossom bud, just like a white fluffy ball look, shape, and then just with the dark for the greenery that is the leaves around it. And so I'm basically keeping everything here in black and white. You will see that I do add a tiny little bit of yellow in the center and a tiny little bit of very pale pink into the center of the cherry blossoms, but the basic cherry blossoms here are left white, as I said earlier, because I wanted to have this starkness against the background. So the black and white is a bit of a theme in here with black and white stripes, and the lady has quite a lot of white in her too, and I've left her cherry blossoms in her hair white as well, just to stand out against the background. But I'm using the Tim Holtz, the Sussex matching dies, and again, it's this one set has everything in it, so it has the large and the small. So I'm using the matching large and the matching small cherry blossom dies, and I'm going to just cut all of these out on my Sussex machine. So you can see they're great because they actually line up absolutely perfectly, and it's really easy to see if you've lined them up correctly, because they don't have an inner edge to the blade. It's the blade and the outer edge only, so it's very accurate. So I had to fussy cut, of course, my little drawings. You'll see I fussy cut them all out, and I won't bore you with the details of that. And I decided before I fussy cut that I should actually color them in, but I didn't. The first one. So I went back in and I did all the coloring, and it's just a black Sharpie pen. You can use any kind of black marker that you want to. It just happened that I had the black Sharpie right beside me and I picked it up. And then I just used a black fine liner to really make sure that my flowers are outlined well. Then I drew this lady. I had drawn her, and I just used some watercolors to add some color to her. I did her face with very, very soft pinks and peaches, and later on I decided that it wasn't quite strong enough, so I do go in and add a little bit more. But you can just do whatever you want. I just put a little bit of pink around the top of her eyelids, and she has very strong lips. I had done them in the black, and then where I'd left some light, I've then gone in and colored with that really bright pinky red, kind of like the picked raspberry. And then I've done her in her gown in blue, and then left the cherry blossoms on her gown in white, just to pick up on all the white. And then I've used the hot pink. So I'm just going to skip ahead and show you little bits of what I'm doing here, but please feel free to do whatever you really want. I like the blue against this background because it's so contrasting. You know, I have little bits of pink in the center of the cherry blossoms and around the edge of her gown, but for the most part it's predominantly blue, as you can see, so it really pops against the background. So I'm just watercoloring all the way through, and light and shade. You can do, you don't have to use watercolor, you can use Copic markers, you can use anything that you really like working with. Tombow markers. You can see I was playing with my colors on the side there, or cleaning my brush off on the side there, because I like to use a water brush. And these are my Koi watercolor. Again, I've had this box for quite a long time, and I just wanted to show those of you who are blind like me. These are the glasses that I steal from my husband every now and then. They're magnifying glasses, and they have tiny little lights on them. They work really well for close-up work, fussy cutting and stuff like that. After I've fussy cut her, I just outline her in black, and then this is a dark gray Copic marker, and it's just like a fairly dark gray. It's not black though, and I just outlined all the way around the edge of my flowers just to give them some definition. And then I decided to do the branch in black because, again, I want that darkness. So I've just drawn a branch and made it kind of jagged and a little bit square on all of the corners. Fussy cut it out, and it's just black cardstock. Fussy cut it, decide where I'm going to put it, do the layout of my page, and then it's just time to glue everything down. So you can see here, I just play around. It doesn't take me long to figure out where I want everything. I play around with what I want and then just glue everything down. The flowers are fabulous, you know, with the dark gray edge. They really stand out great against the background. So I used a spray glue on her, so I just took her, sprayed her back. You can use any glue you want. Mostly the glue that I use is dries clear. It's my favorite glue. Here I just use the spray glue because it's a big surface, and then I just put some acrylic blocks on top to make sure it's held down, and then I glued my branch on with dries clear. And this is great because if you do get a little bit on to your page, it does dry clear. Because I have oxide as my top layer, I try to be very, very careful. That's why you see me gluing the top part and working my way down the branch so that I'm not getting glue out anywhere else. And anything that wasn't fully stuck down with the lady, I just used the dries clear and dabbed it in. I cut off any excess of the branch, and then I just have to figure out where I want to put all my bits and pieces. And again, just figure out the layout, then just glue them all down. And you can see there's a little bit sticking out at the top of the top flower. I will just trim that off with a pair of scissors afterwards. And because I've got a black branch and then I have the black leaves, it kind of makes everything look like it's all one unit. So glue it all down. You'll see here I just add a little bit more color onto her. I found her a little bit too pale, and a little bit of yellow. And this is just a watercolor marker by Zig, and then I used a very pale pink. Again, just didn't want to put too much color, didn't want to pull the eye into the flowers too much. Just a little bit of yellow and pink. That's me attempting to show you the marker. My camera will not focus when I come in this close. You know, if I have it on autofocus, it just zooms in and out and in and out. So I'm very, very sorry. But also, you know, this isn't really a video about product. It's really a video about the techniques. So I advise you to use products you have. If you have Tombow markers, go ahead, use Tombow markers. Sorry for my grey head being in the way there. And then go back to my Copic markers, and I'm using a dark grey and a light grey. Again, Tombow markers are just fine. So I'm just going to outline her all the way around, first in the dark gray, then I use the light gray to blend it into the background. This just makes her pop a little bit more. You can see I needed to glue a little area there. And I repeat this all the way around the edge, and I only do it on the lady. I often will do this on other pieces that are on the page, but when I glued my flowers down, I just glued the center part down so that the edges kind of sort of a little bit curl up, and they have a dimension of their own anyway. Then I just take a black fine liner pen and I just go right into the very, very edge, and again this just adds a tiny little bit more depth to the feature, which is the Japanese lady. She is obviously the feature of this page. I've always wanted to go to Japan. I've always wanted to see the Cherry Blossom Festival there, but this is, I think, is probably as close as I'm ever going to get to it, especially at the moment with COVID-19. There we have the Versified Claire, and I'm just touching up the edge a little bit, making it darker and more prominent. The first layer of this, I went in a little bit from the edge in a little bit on the page. This layer I'm literally just doing the actual edge of the page and just popping it up, and I'm just using a white Signo marker to add a little bit of detail and a little bit of light, and I also use the gray Copic for a little bit of shadowing on her, just detailing her up. To those who can dream, there's no such place as far away. And now I'm using this Versified Claire. It's the most beautiful shade of blue. It's called Medieval Blue, and it's a very rich, intense blue, and it matches with the blue of her dress really, or her kimono, really beautiful. And you can see the color is just a really perfect match. So I just stamp it and cut it out, and then I cut the corners with a little corner chopper. I have this one in two sizes. It's a smaller size, which is what I'm using here, and then I have a larger one. And then of course I decided that I needed to have the blue behind that, backing that, so I did that. I cut a little piece that fits perfectly behind it to frame the quote, and then I'm going back to this beautiful picked raspberry, and I'm just doing a little bit picked raspberry around the edge so that when it's against the blue background it pops a little bit, and also just ties into the background. I printed this onto a cream paper so it's not white, and it doesn't kind of take your eye too much away from the black and white look, but there it is. So that's the page for today, and if you just hang on a little second, you will be able to see some still photographs of it. So this first photograph is a close-up of, you can see how much more intense the color is when you take a photo of it. This is the cherry blossom part, and then the lady's face, and so you can see the colors a little bit more clearly perhaps, and then some detailing of the flourishes and what the color looks like settled into that, and then this is the whole page. So if you want to get the picture to color in yourself, contact me via my website and I will email you a copy. Thank you very much for watching.